Pat. It's Pat on Brands. Watch how you branded, man. A pat on the back is a pat from the man. Better be branded, man. Pat from the pat is a pat on the brand. If it's enormous, flawless, gorgeous, don't be cautious, cordless. Making a move, making a hustle, all of them making a borders. Watch how you branded, man. A pat on the back.
Without further ado, may I please call on our panelists. I will first start with Mr. Sbusiso Kumalo, Marketing Executive of African Bank. Miss Giulia, I'm going to try. Before you go, let me try this. Mrs. Giuilia Ioro-Ndlovu. Almost. She is the CMO at PepsiCo SA Snacks. And lastly, I have Mr. Zayd Abrahams, the CMO at TigerBrands. Thank you, everybody.
I don't like reading bios, briefly your journey and, why you're here.
Pat, thank you for inviting us and thank you for reaching out. I don't know who you hustled for my details, but bless them and bless you. I mean, I'm really inspired by what you're doing and what you have done. And I think South Africa needs, millions of Pats. So congratulations and well done. I think you need a Pat. So yeah, I've been in marketing. I mean, I started my career around early 2000s. I've worked for SA Breweries. I worked for another bank. And it's been a phenomenal journey. I think throughout, when I reflect back now on my career, I think it's just loving what you do and the passion that you have for what you do. So it wasn't a job per se. It was really doing something that you love. And, I was saying to Bukhosi, I'm actually on leave. So I flew from Cape Town and so that I could be here because I didn't want to drop you. So he's like, you really flew from Cape Town? So I'm like, yeah, I'll do that, because I know what this means to you and I know what it means to have the support because I had that support as well. So my journey in marketing has been blessed. I currently am the CMO for African Bank. I think it's almost like, in life, it's great to find yourself, and you really are successful at that moment where you find yourself, but a lot of people never lose themselves. So it's good to find yourself, but it's also great to lose yourself. And when you lose yourself, that's when you become significant. And you need to lose yourself in the service of others. So I feel like I've spent so many years in marketing, working in banking and crafting and perfecting my craft so that I can be of service to this brand that at this juncture really needed a marketing skill that could really take it to its destiny.
Well, great. Thank you for that. Giulia, you have a master's in engineering, and I tried to read the name of the university you studied. I couldn't. I tried several times. What got you into marketing?
Yeah, I studied chemical engineering, and then I got into the world of FMCGs immediately after. Actually, I wanted to be a university professor. So I was signed in after I graduated for a PhD, and everyone was very supportive and I was very excited. After a few months, I thought everything was too slow. I wanted pressure, I wanted, the pace and everything. And this is where I moved, for the dismay of my parents. I decided to start my corporate career. And so I was in research and development at the beginning because that was the easiest way in. I was a scientist, actually. So research and development was the normal way in. So I was working on Pampers napping. And I learned you have no idea how complex and difficult is making actually nappies. So I started like that. Then I moved to Unilever. I did everything I could, but I started moving on the consumer inside of things because I loved the human element of the brands, the products, the stories. We'll talk a little bit more about that, but I think the human centricity of your stories is absolutely critical because this is the way that you make a mark in people's hearts and souls. And this is what remains, this is what creates the longevity that then builds heritage brands. And so that was my first pivot. And when I was in Insights, I was absolutely at my best. I moved to South Africa. I had the opportunity to join PepsiCo. And at the time, they wanted to build this consumer insights. They had no idea what it was about. And they wanted someone to build the capability, to build the team, to build the skills, to build all the challenges. And I got that. And I was in love with the consumer research, the analytics part. And when I was there, and I was there working with the marketing teams, I said, oh my God, I will never be in marketing, never, ever. This kind of fluffy stuff, I want numbers, you know. And then I didn't have a choice, so it wasn't a choice for me. The CEO of our sector said, you know, we are struggling now with our snacks category. You are the only one who has all the experience. You're going to do marketing. I said, okay. That was 3.5 years ago. I pivoted again, forced. Yeah. And I'm loving it. With
so you got into marketing at the highest level. You're special.
Yeah, unfortunately for me.
You are very special.
Yeah, that was a big pivot, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think there was a lot of faith in that. I got a lot of support, though, because obviously I knew that I didn't have the background and the skills. I knew the insights behind why people consume snacks, what do they think about the brands, how could I build stronger brands, but I didn't have the skills. I never briefed a creative agencies in my life. You know, I never written a creative brief in my life, and it was an amazing learning curve.
Sure.
And this is where I am. Yeah.
Oh, interesting. And for the benefit of those that do not know the brands that you actually are leading, you know, because PepsiCo is the corporate brand. So what are some of the brands that are in your state?
Amazimba. Knickknacks, to talk about heritage brands. And then we have Lay's, we have Doritos, we have Fritos, we have Safari. Different brands, different bills.
I think Simba, you know Simba, rose flavor. Yeah. Oh, wow, interesting. Tap it up for her, please. Mr. Abrahams from banking, FMCG, you've been in the game, but also I know you from humble beginnings back in KZN. Can you briefly just, you know, take us through that journey?
Hello, Pat, and just really thank you for everything that you do for our community and bringing the elders together. I'm only 26, okay? I've got to say, I met a lady in the front next to me. Her name is Messiah, so really blessed to have met you tonight. Thank you.
Yes.
Look, I think what everyone is saying here, such beautiful stories. Every experience matters. Every experience in your journey matters. I see Ashraf here. Hello, Ashraf. I haven't seen you since maybe 2010, my word. But, I was like a hustler, government school, trying to get money, etc. And probably the first thing that I did to earn money was selling Coca-Cola out of a bucket at a flea market.
Sure. True Durban style. I'm kidding.
Kasi, true, from Sydenham in Durban, right? Yeah. And funny, it was one of the things that connected me when I led marketing at the Coca-Cola company pre the World Cup and during the World Cup. Because I could remember the taste of that as a 3-year-old and as a teenager selling that. Then I remember distinctly wanting to be a lawyer. You know, I grew up in that side of 94. Still 26, let's be real. And part of that was to get through university. I lost my mother late, so I did part-time jobs, was selling fragrances. I could afford Ego if I saved money.
Ego.
Deodorant.
Who knows Ego? Remembers Ego. Okay,
But these people were buying fine fragrances from me, and I was like, I don't understand. Sure. But when we were trained in that from the people from Europe and America, you know, all the science and the love story of the fragrances, I was like, that is called a brand. That is what a brand is. Late in my career, I worked in fine fragrances at L'Oreal in the UK. Cassie boy, no? Okay. Yeah. Late in my career, I changed the name of Ego to X at Unilever as one of the things that I did. So every experience matters. The first day I walked into Unilever as a graduate or whatnot, management trainee, right? I'll never forget, I had 2 brand managers. One was cool, right? And the one said to me, okay, Zayd, you've got to have to shred all of these papers. What did I know? My first full-time job, right? I'd worked at the Truth and Reconciliation Commission as well, because remember, I wanted to be a lawyer and all of that. But now I wanted to do this brand thing, this marketing thing. But you know what? Every paper I shred, I read. So I knew the history of Ola, of Unilever, of foods, all different categories, because they made me shred paper. So I had, education is not just formal education, it's go and hustle the education. And now everything is free, everything is there and available. Yeah. But that's what I did. And those are the things that I love this generation. They have that in them, right? Yeah. And I think it's up to all of us to keep nurturing all of that, yeah?
Amazing.
I think another important thing is remaining true to the roots of ourselves as custodians of brands. We're only here for a period in time to look after these brands. I like to partner with agencies to jointly have joint custody of the brands. But more importantly is to remain true to the roots of the brands. And that's our responsibility, to make sure that those roots, even if they're not strong, we strengthen them, but also we nurture them for the next generation. Pat, keep doing what you do. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for that. Sbu, Zayd just spoke about, generation, leaving things better for the next generation. I think the work that the late Dr. Richard Maponya and Bontate Matsuinyane, what they did with this brand called African Bank. If you can just take us to from the beginning, the early days of this beautiful brand that now we've grown to admire, how it came into being.
Thank you. So I think in any economy, and South Africa is not unique, you have to support entrepreneurship in order for the economy to be successful. Because in entrepreneurship is ideas, is innovation, and is always the next pivot, the things that move you forward, right? We don't live in the Stone Age anymore, right? So creativity and innovation said, hey, we don't have to be sitting on stones. We got to create something new. So that's why I actually absolutely love my industry and my career. So back in 1964, a group of businessmen ascended on Soweto and formed NAFCOC, which is an organization, like a chamber of commerce. And they were coming together to deal with the issues that they were facing just as business people. How could they expand their businesses? How could they get to new markets? How could they employ more people? How could they grow? How could they grow their franchises? And there was the single most challenge, the biggest challenge that was common amongst most of the businesses that were there was access to capital. The banks then did not give loans to black people. It didn't matter what business you ran, how big the business was, how successful it was. You just were not served. So, and they discussed that. And you know, at that time, they were under 40. They were under 40. They were our age. And they're discussing at the height of apartheid. You know, in 1964, they sent Nelson Mandela to prison. So there's a Rivonia trial happening, and there's a group of business people that are getting together and saying, let's start a bank, our own bank, because they won't lend to us, so let's just help ourselves. They're not sitting there moaning about it. They're saying, what can we do about it? What was very profound is that in that sitting, Thabo Mbeki's mother was the only female delegate at that NAFCA conference, which is a very significant piece of information. So they sat and they said, well, if a delegate stood up and said, if all we do is just talk but don't put skin in the game, this will remain just an idea. So they got into their pockets and put money on the table. Guess how much they raised?
Okay. Anyone guess how much they raised?
For a lanyard. $70.
Hectic.
They raised $70. It was a lot of money back then. Yeah. It was not enough to start a bank. But it was significant to the notion of you have to put your own skin in the game. If you don't put your skin in the game, you will not be driven by this desire. So why did they start a bank? Was it a business opportunity? No, it wasn't. It was an economic service opportunity. The people were not being served. They never got there and said, hey, how can we become billionaires? Let's start a bank. Said, how can we grow our businesses and how can we serve the people, our people, that were marginalized, couldn't vote, couldn't bank, couldn't own homes, couldn't buy cars, couldn't send their kids to university. Everything had to be a stokvel. Your mom putting money under the pillow in order for any amount of money that needed to cater for any investment. So that was the reason behind African Bank starting. And it took them 10 years to raise. So the story is that the South African government, the Minister of Finance back then, made the conditions of getting the license so difficult. So difficult. First of all, they needed $1 million. So in 1964, are you going to get $1 million rands? You know what I mean? A lot of money. They couldn't open the bank in South Africa, so it had to be in the homelands. So they had to galvanize all the chiefs from all the different tribal chiefs from the different homelands to support the idea of blacks wanting to have their own banks. It's like, you know, blacks gone crazy or something like that.
Sure.
Then they said you can't employ anyone from the banks.
So how are you going to run a bank without experienced people?
You tell me. You can't employ anyone, and you cannot train your people from any of the training institutions that were in South Africa.
Hectic.
So you can have the bank, get $1 million to give you a license, but you'll figure it out yourself. You know?
Hectic.
So it was like an impossible task. So the story about it really should move a lot of people that today, are are sitting with ideas that no one really believes in, are sitting with business plans, wanting to do careers that they themselves have started to feel like they can give up. They can give up on themselves. They're giving up on their community, on their family. This is a story that should inspire and ignite that hope in every single one of the South Africans, especially if you're black, that if they could be able to overcome all those obstacles in 1964, then, what's stopping us today with all the challenges that we have? The country still needs us. The future, the youth still need us. So we stand. I feel like I stand on the shoulders of giants, and it's our job to do better, because now we don't have the obstacles that they had.
Sure. What a story. I mean, it's unthinkable. I've heard this story too many times. That's why I wanted you to narrate it. And every time I hear it, I just feel goosebumps, because it's unthinkable what this brand has went through and to be what it is today, And I think it's one brand that we should all be behind, and supporting, not only supporting, but also whose story needs to be continued to be told for generations to come as well. So, moving to you, Giulia, and I think before I move to Giulia, also I think it started with the purpose. There's a trending topic now in boardrooms, marketing meetings, purpose-led brands. I think African Bank is the only brand that I know of that really started off with a strong purpose, and it didn't stumble upon it as it moves along, because it's a cool thing to show up as a brand that cares for the people. Giulia, I mean, you grew up in Italy. I mean, growing up, there was a brand called RR Cerruti. It was like an Italian brand. It had like 2 R's. We were wearing fila. We had people in the townships wearing Ama Italiano, Italian shirts, And that's like decades ago, What is it that about Italy, as a nation or as a country that, has managed or helped them to produce like really solid heritage brands that maybe South Africa can learn from? Or also, what is it that South Africa is doing right that maybe Italy can also learn a thing or two from us?
Yeah. Well, you're talking about brands that have been there for centuries, right? Which is one of the strengths of heritage brands. But I think what made these brands strong in Italy, you mentioned few, but you have all the luxury brands, Armani, Valentino, Gucci, Ferrari. You move to Nutella spread, etc. There is a common thread around all of this, which is they started as family-owned brands, most of them. Barilla as well, the pasta brand. They started because at some stage in their families there was a visionary who understood that there was a need of a luxury brand or a chocolate spread no one has done. Then how many copies do you have on Nutella? Cheaper copies today, even in Italy, not only here. But they were visionary and they got to that point first. They were able to make that promise to consumer first, and they own their territory. Even, copycats of that couldn't actually really compete. And then they had the ability to pass that vision across the generation of that family. So if you see most of these brands years and years after, in some cases centuries after, are still managed through the family. And even when the brands have grown and have been exported everywhere in the world, they've become amazing international brands, there is always an eye that makes sure that those values that they were true then are still true today. Sure. That they still, they still keep that promise, they still keep that quality, they still keep a number of things. Like, one example is how many of these brands today have moved their manufacturing to China, for example. I'm talking about luxury brands, and not much. They still kept it true to this is made in Italy by Italian people, and that is one of the values that they actually passed on from one member of the family to another. There was a time in England, I don't know if it was here as well, where in order to be able to say made in Italy, you needed to prove it with a certificate that that was true because of the so many Hong Kongs that they were there, you know?
Even somewhere here there's a fake Gucci bag. Yeah. Kidding.
And you know, and there is nothing wrong with that because these brands are aspirational. So there are people who can't afford them, and it's a lot of us, right? And so if they buy Hong Kong, but because they believe in what the brand stands for, and what the brands can add to their personality and how the brands make them feel, which is, again, what is the emotional attachment that you have to this brand. So that is the characteristic of Italian strong brands. They start with the family, and those values that they were generated at the onset were actually passed on. And even if they become huge brands and they went all over the world, there is still that element that stays absolutely consistently, and it beats time, it beats challenges, it beats everything.
Sure, interesting. Thank you for that story. So Zayd, I mean, with TigerBrands, you know, who of you knows TigerBrands here? Okay, a lot of you. It's strange for like a holding company or a group to be as popular as the brands that it makes. I mean, you sitting at the helm of, I'd say, the home of South Africa's heritage brands. If you can just touch on like what makes, like for example, Koo to be the Koo that it was when I was a little boy to what it is today. What makes All Gold, you know, what it was at that particular time when I was still growing up in the village and today. What is the essence of heritage brands in your view?
Thank you for that. Let's talk about, when you say the essence, for me, the starting point is what is the root of this brand? It's what I mentioned earlier. What is some companies call it the root strength, but really what's in the DNA of the brand? And when you're passing through a brand's journey, whether you're a marketing assistant or an agency or CMO, it doesn't really matter. It is our responsibility to understand that. Where does this brand come from? Why is All Gold? Could you complete the sentence for me? All gold, all gold? I didn't make that. My team made that. That's been there for generations, right? But that is an intrinsic part of the DNA. But it's so important. It means when I talk to my R&D team, I need to know what is the composition of the tomato, what kinds of tomatoes we use, where do we farm the tomatoes, what is the label quality, what is the bottle, the roll of it. And those things are not just functional anymore. They're part of people's lives. And I think COVID probably reminded a lot of people in the world about the importance of, let's call it, the things that they may have taken for granted because life became so busy, the things that they really have this deep nostalgia for. And funny enough, research globally, but more importantly in Africa, in Brazil, in China, in India, shows that the younger generations have an affinity to heritage that maybe a previous generation missed. And that's quite an interesting thing for us as marketers, custodians of brands, to remember. We've got to maintain our relevance to youth. Giulia, congratulations to you and your team. Coolest snack, right, in the country. We're the coolest sweets brand with Maynards. Also coolest tin stuff, cool. But there's also All Gold there, etc. That's so important. Whether it's Coca-Cola, whether it's food, whether it's banks, it's so important to nurture that next generation. But again, if these things have been around for generations, some of them centuries, how do you make it relevant for the next generation? Because at some point you tasted ku, you tasted mama ku, right? And you were probably not the age that you are now when you tasted mama ku, but somehow it's still ingrained in your memory structure. It's ingrained in associations. And it's also up to us, to Giulia's point about Italian brands. What's that emotional connection that we remain connected with all different generations?
Sure. Interesting. So bringing it to our topic, obviously, the role of heritage brands. Last year, the topic was the role of heritage brands in building society. So this year, we, moving forward to say, looking into the future, and especially where we find ourselves now as a country, right? So I'm going to talk about black coffee a lot. So this afternoon, I attended the media launch for the send-off, and he said something very profound. So he said the brand that's hosting the whole thing, maybe let me give them free airtime because the work they did is incredible. Castle Light, right? So Castle Light is doing this send-off party. They ran a competition online, and he was so grateful to Castle Light because him playing at Madison Square Garden, even though it's huge, it's a big achievement for any artist, right? To go perform there. But Castle Light was the only, I'd say, brand that really drove the excitement locally. Not even Department of Arts and Culture. Let's not even go there, right? It was the brand. So brands play a very important role. I mean, I'm also now following the Springboks. It's because of the brands, not because of what the department is saying about supporting the Bokkers. It's DSTV, it's all these other brands that are creating the excitement in driving. So we can all agree that brands are actually playing a big role in moving the country forward. So my question is, Sbu, to you, now that, the brand that you're leading has sort of evolved, survived apartheid into democracy, survived COVID-19, all these major events. Zayd talked about relevance, right? So how do you maintain that as a brand, so that also for generations to come, African Bank still becomes that particular brand? And I know maybe the answer might circle back to what some of the storytellers have touched on, but I think it's important in terms of now moving ahead and also where we find ourselves as a country.
Thanks a lot, Pat. I think it's a key question. So something that I often talk about, we need to learn to write our stories, and we need to learn to tell our stories and to be in charge of our narrative in South Africa, just in general, because the future generation's going to ask us what we did, right? What this generation has done. And we're going to need to answer. So it's only through the stories that, the narrative moves from generation to generation. But what is key is to be authentic. You can't create it. You can't sit in a room and get an agency and say, hey, give us a purpose, and then you get 10 different purposes and they say, no, wait, the kids that are hungry there, and there's water problem, there's a sanitation, they're dying of the cholera there, maybe that's what, you can't do that. You really have to go and say, why do you exist? People don't buy what you do or how you do it. They actually truly buy why. What's your why? What's the drive behind it? And that's what has allowed a lot of brands to survive. African Bank has also survived quite a lot of adversity. But the story still stands because you can't take it away from that. So you have to be authentic, and you have to ensure that what you do, what you stand for doesn't change. You can just change the tactics of how you communicate it. You know, our product and the services that we offer have to stand the test of what customers are expecting. So people are not just going to buy a story. They're especially banking, you're parting with your money. So you want to know that, you know, the app works. They've got an app, they've got the services. So that's the heavy lifting and the work that we need to do to make sure that, you know, we actually have the services and the products that people actually want. And we can be able to serve the market at the right price, right? But when you said that Black Coffee is grateful for the brands that support. Brands need people supporting the brands because it takes individuals to say, you know, I'm making a conscious choice. You know, in other countries like China, for example, what I love about governments that really put their weight behind locally born brands, especially in the technology space, because success is never overnight. I worked for my previous bank, started from zero, and it took 20 years to build it. And when it was built, people were like, oh, what, overnight success? No, it was not overnight success, because I was there when they couldn't pay salaries. You know, I was there when they were declined a loan to buy a printer. I was there when they didn't know, okay, what are we going to do this month? So it's not overnight success. It only feels like overnight success once you're successful to someone else. But we need people. So you're successful. It takes you to say, I'm not saying move. You still bank with Nedbank because you know. So I'm not saying move from your bank. Okay. But I'm just saying that, you know, how can you be a successful South African and you don't have an African bank in your wallet? That should be the question. How can you? How can I be a proud dad, you know, to my kids and none of my kids have Batu shoes? You know, I have to make that vote. That's a vote that I'm making. Sure. So there's a patriarchy to it as well. That is necessary, that we back the brands, because those are the brands. You can't talk about a brand that's 100 years old unless there was a 100-year-old commitment behind it. And where does that commitment come? It comes from you and I. Yeah. You know? So that's, I think, you know, the job that needs to be done, but it's not just the brands. Yeah. It's also the individuals.
Absolutely. But also you touched on, obviously, a previous employer, you know, startup, and now you're coming into like an established brand that has been around for years. How was that transition?
I think it feels the same, because I think the African bank story is not known. So until, you know, we repositioned and had the campaign we did with Ricky Rick, you know, that was almost, it felt like it's the first time that the brand is actually saying, you know what, this is where we came from. Sure. You know, I think the older generation might know, you know, but the newer generation, and they don't know. I mean, you know Apple, you know Steve Jobs, you know he was fired. Yeah. You even know Alibaba, you know Jack Ma, you know that, you know, 22 people went for interview, 21 got the job. He didn't. Yeah. You know, that's a story, that's a brand, that's heritage, that's what it is. Yeah. You know, but this was a best kept secret. So for me, I think just to learn that in 1964, the black guys that had, you know, the guts to say we're going to start a bank was just enough for me to say, you know what, I'm sold. You know what I mean? I'm sold, because, you know, this needs to be, and young people are, I'm finding that they're much more, you know, they're much more open, and they've got this kind of like revolutionary kind of like mentality about it. So they want brands that stand for something. Absolutely. So they don't just want to back you just for the sake of what do you stand for? and what drives you and what you stand against. And I'm hoping that our brand will posture itself and be successful, because that's the future. And we know that our heart is in the right place. And we know that we believe in South Africa. That's why we say, hey, it's a brand that believes in you.
Sure.
You know, we might not have, you know, all the things that you need today, but we believe in you. And that's what we want to be about. And that's what we'll always be about as a brand.
Sure. Thanks for that. Giulia, you know, you are leading, obviously. I remember, actually, Nicknacks was our sponsor for the food category last year at the Top 16 Ethon Brands Awards. And I remember when the marketing manager came on stage, it was like the #1 kasi snack. You know,
Yes.
for years it's been 1 rand. I don't know how much is it now. When I was growing up, you always spent
150.
150 now. Okay, so I mean, you shared your story in terms of how you got into marketing. You said, look, these brands are seeing some sort of flames, pun intended. Okay, but then you had to now take over these brands and move them forward and make sure that they are future fit. So, what has been some of the learnings when you took on the role?
Yeah, so I have a lot of stories about that and a lot of learning, but one very tough job for a marketer is when you have a heritage brand in your portfolio. There is this continuous, and it's a minefield really, there is this continuous balance on wanting to modernize the brand and make it more contemporary without losing that positive nostalgia that Zayd was talking about. It's absolutely not an easy job. First of all, you need to understand the consumer, the new consumer trends, the new perceptions, how the needs have evolved, for example. And then you need to leverage that to try and shape the new direction of your brand. You need to fully understand what are the elements of your brand. You were talking about the root strengths. This is how we call them in Unilever. There are a lot of ways to call them, but what are those distinctive assets of your brand that you can't give away? And here is the story with Simba. So I come, really without any marketing experience. Of course, I worked on brands and with brands for a long time. And I get this little carrot of having to turn around the performance of the brand Simba, which in turn would have turned around the performance of the entire snacks portfolio, because Simba is more than 50% of net revenue of our entire portfolio. Okay, so me coming from an insights point of view, I started trying to understand what went wrong with the brand. Why are we losing share? What does the consumer think about the brand? Where did you completely disconnect it with our consumer, with our what we call core target? And one of the things we realized is that there were quite a lot of people who have grown up with Simba, and they got tired of it. They were the same flavors, it's been the same pack for a long time. We've been not refreshing and innovating at the speed as our competitors were. So we got a bit complacent. And that was across any touch point that you can imagine, the feedback was the same. So here I come, fresh marketer, and I said, okay, we are gonna change everything. So change agency, creative agency. That was right, though. That was probably the only good thing that I did in my first year. But also we said, okay, we are losing the younger generation who got really tired of having to experience these snacks that they were given by their parents and then grandmother, etc. Let's completely modernize the brand. We did a new packaging, and the new packaging was very well received. We wanted to have Simba as, the South African brand, the one that is authentic, has got flavor that are you know, South African flavors that remind South Africa of their roots. So we created a new flavor. And these two things worked quite well. What we got completely wrong was...
What were those flavors?
Sorry?
The flavors.
We had chakalaka, we had Breivorst, and...
Chutney?
Yeah. No, chutney has been there for a long time, actually. Mrs. Bolts, that is a long other stories that I can tell you. But when we went to communication, we tried to understand how can we reconnect with the youth, right? Our cohort has always been the kind of older consumers, but we wanted to reconnect with the younger. Also because if we really bring equity with the younger cohorts, they then take it with them over time. And so what was very, very on and trendy at the time, Amapiano. So we decided to create this, and I am very biased, but I think it was an amazing campaign, which was called The Sounds of Flavor. So we called the best DJ in Amapiano, DJ Maporizza, and we actually created a music with him, a piece of music which was around, you know, Amapiano, I learned, I didn't know at the time, but Amapiano is built on a number, I think there are 5 different sounds that are combined and they created your music.
Without a piano playing.
Without a piano playing. So we decided to use the metaphor that each of the flavor create a sound in your mouth when you bite the chip that builds this song into it. And there was Maporizza who was coordinating this amazing music and amazing dance. We all felt it was great. It tested well with the consumers. But when we then launched it, it didn't yield the impact that we were expecting. And what we realized is that by doing this, we changed so much the brand and what the brand stood for our consumers that people couldn't recognize it anymore. It was too much contemporary. We made it too contemporary for the consumers, actually the target audience, who really recognize the brand. They couldn't understand the metaphor. They couldn't follow the story. Most of them, the older consumer, didn't know who DJ Maporizza was. And it was very polarizing. The youth liked it, but we gained some youth consumers. We lost the core target older consumers. A lot of more work trying to get to this point that seems very simple, but we couldn't understand because we said, we have this amazing campaign. Why they don't get it? Why they don't like it? So it took a few months. And then we decided to meet our consumers in the middle. So what we did is, Simba is an heritage brand, and one of the strength of the heritage, or one of the qualities, one of the characteristics on an heritage brand is it's universal, you know? No one can think of chips without thinking of Simba. No one can think of chutney without having Mrs. Ball chutney in mind. So we wanted to go back to a kind of slice of life story that was closer to the everyday life of our consumers, the everyday life of our consumers, but was also modernized. And so we had a number of slices of life talking about what was happening then, which was the COVID, etc. So we called in, for example, one of the family meetings, right? So one of our scenes was a family meeting, which was contemporary because it was all about the COVID, etc. But at the same time was about what people were experiencing in real life at that time. We had taxi, bus scenes, etc., etc. And then we realized that also DJ Maporizza was very polarizing. So we moved to someone who we felt was liked by all. And this was Pop-Ups. A very down-to-earth guy, very approachable, and this is what actually he identifies Simba as a brand completely, because this is what Simba stands for. Simba is a brand for everyone. It doesn't discriminate, doesn't have age or socioeconomical level differences. Is a brand to be enjoyed by everyone. And so was in Pop-Ups. And this is where our new platform was created. We kept elements that were key before, like roars with flavor, which was, a reflection of the strength of our brand and our performance. We are the most performing brand, not because we communicate that, but also because we know we beat all our competitors in the test that we do. So we kept all these elements, but we evolved with the flavors. We met midway in terms of communication. That was actually appreciated, and since then, it's been 2-3 years, we have kept that platform. And we are now moving on. So the key lessons for us were the evolution of a heritage brand needs to be monitored and managed very carefully.
Sure.
Absolutely, very carefully. You need to understand what are those assets without which people don't remember your brands anymore, don't recognize your brands anymore, but at the same time understand what is evolving in the consumer minds and how to keep up with that evolution.
And knickknacks, because I see now you've got
knickknacks is another
young,
story.
dynamic.
I have a bit of time, sorry. So knickknacks has always been there as the real one, the real Makoya, we were calling it, the real knack. But we never associated the brand with an element of trust or an element of promise that was relevant for the Kasi youth. Until we understood that actually there was one universal insight in the Kasi youth, which was they felt proud of having been born and grown up in the Kasi, but they were limited in their pride by the negative connotation that not only locally but also internationally sometimes the township has. Or there is high crime, or there are people there who don't have a jobs, they don't want to do anything, etc., etc. And this perception was limiting them. So we decided to use knickknacks as a brand who could free them up and really make sure that they could feel the pride of celebrating the Kasi youth and their own knack. And we played on the word knack. So we wanted them to actually come out and flourish in their own, whatever it was, in their own passion. Could be dancing, could be being an artist, could be a painter. We wanted to actually promote the youth and eliminate those barriers of bias that there were around the Kasi life. So what we have started to do, we created a campaign which is called Own Your Knack, which is be proud on what you are passionate about, what you are good about, and go and take it out and grow in it. And every year, we started actually this year, we donate scholarship we picked 3 of these Ikasi youth, and we donate scholarship in the field that they are passionate about so that they can grow in that field. And then they will be the ones mentoring new youth to grow. And this it's been now only 18 months, but has been very well perceived and received by our youth, and knickknacks has found its place. So Own Your Knack is our platform to grow the dreams of the Kasi youth.
Sure, thank you so much for that. Zayd, I think TigerBrands is the house of heritage brands. You speak rice, you speak condiments, you speak sweets, you speak juice. How do you find a balance across all these, iconic brands and make sure that, they don't overshadow each other. For example, we noticed, for the past years, actually this year, there hasn't been anything from a rice perspective because Tastic has always, led, Heritage Month, with changing the packaging and partnering with iconic South Africans that are doing amazing things. Albany, we also saw Albany trending not so long ago with that young girl, So how do you maintain the balance as someone who's obviously sitting at the helm of these brands to make sure that they all get equal shine, for lack of a better word?
It's so important to remain true to what the brands are. And as you said, the brands are in so many different categories at TigerBrands. And the reality with heritage brands, it's not always under our control. It's in the public domain. So Sia, when just before the Rugby World Cup, when he was talking about his wedding anniversary, he talks about Doom, which is one of ours, right? So, it's in his domain. The other night, Julius on TikTok is talking about the Tinkies that just disappears from his cupboard. He buys and then it vanishes, the six-pack, then they must go to the neighbor. So heritage brands are going to be part of popular culture. And I so agree with you. It's like, how do you nurture and when to change what? And staying true to yourself. So the Albany little girl is not, something that can be bought or invented or created. But it is about the resonance that you have in communities far and wide. I don't think this is an era for exclusivity. I think it's an era for inclusivity of brands. And how do you use brands, to your point about black coffee, to really bring people together, And if I look at innovation, I think innovation plays a huge role in that, which you mentioned as well. And one of my favorites probably on Cross and Blackwell. I mean, tangy mayonnaise is tangy mayonnaise if it's from Cross and Blackwell, right? But I think what the team did in launching Kasi Magic as a different way of experiencing Cross and Blackwell, which they grew up with, but now it's expanded consumption occasions. It's expanded the brand equity, for example, and it's made us live beyond, what it was known for before. And I think another important thing is, and Giulia, you mentioned it a lot, and from your research background as well, and our Kantar partners are here, thank you so much. Marketing is not just the communication. It's the science as well. It's knowing what is driving what part of, the brand funnel. How are you moving from people being aware to who's loyal, where do we penetrate? It's really knowing the detail of the brand. And that's what I encourage the teams to do. If I look at another example, Jelly Tots, there's nothing that you actually want to touch on that. You just want to let it breathe and grow. But you'll still see what we have in the plans, like how do you bring excitement even to things that have been around for so long. But again, what's important is knowing that DNA of the brand. And funny enough, the DNA, when you understand the history of that brand, like Coca-Cola, it comes from a whole different era, but how that's modernized over time. Now AI flavors and things like that. As marketers, we need to not just be fearful of technology, but work out how to collaborate with technology. And I think my time in banking, on the other side of yourself, Sbu, and telcos, liberates you to do that. And FMCG, these brands have been here for centuries in most cases. And it's our jobs to make sure that they're here for the next centuries as well. So hopefully that answers it. Thanks.
Speaking about next centuries, and I think in the audience you also have like entrepreneurs, who are running small businesses. What is it that heritage brands have been doing right that as young entrepreneurs or small business owners can take from them and apply practical? Yes, you did touch on the values, don't lose yourself, but what else outside of the, we call it the roots of the brand, that they can use, that big brands like yourselves are implementing almost on a daily to make sure that you stay relevant?
I'll be very honest. So last year I went to this entrepreneurship summit in Tembisa. And I met, a young man who's got he's an entrepreneur. So he said he was an entrepreneur. So I asked him what he did. And he says, yeah, he's hustling basically. So I think he wanted to know what are my pain points, then he'll service those pain points. So from events to printing to, So I think as an entrepreneur, you really need to be known for something, So if tomorrow they say, hey, Pat is starting an airline, I would kind of like be, okay, that's a pivot, Yeah. But you're a brand guy. You're a brand man. You know what I mean? So I think even with my team, we're conceptualizing, and I'm like, hey, what does Pat say? Because he's immersed in brands and everything. So he's built the equity. So I always say as an entrepreneur, first of all, if you want to extract the gold, build the shaft. You have to build the shaft. The roots of a tree first go down before the tree grows up, So build that. Don't be here and there. And, so I talk about identity. And I say, the four stages of, building your identity from inception, deception, transformation, identity. So moving from your unconscious incompetence and identity being your unconscious competence, meaning that you don't have to ask what black coffee does. And he doesn't need to get into the zone to, the minute that's him, that's his identity. He's a DJ. Music is what he does. So he's on the turntable. So what an entrepreneur can learn from any brand that has withstood that is consistency. Be not a jack of all trades, but just really be consistent. And you think of a brand like Apple, and you say, okay, but Apple has done phones, and then they went and they did computers, and then they did this, and whatever it is. And you think that they're not consistent. No. They've been selling the exact same thing ever since, just like McDonald's. You can have a half-eaten McDonald's in a trash can, and you will recognize that that's a McDonald's burger, right?
Yeah.
Because it's consistent.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
consistency.
That's what they sell. McDonald's sells consistency because you don't have to wonder what the meal would look like, You know exactly what those chips are going to look like. That's what they sell, consistency. So what are you selling as an entrepreneur? What's your business about? And once you've identified that, be consistent with that.
Got you. And I always say, when I engage with other entrepreneurs, you find that their companies are like Mahlangu, projects and trading. Then they do marketing, construction, and catering. I'm like, God. No, there's no way. We also saw with COVIDpreneurs, some 2 years ago when there was demand for PPEs and stuff. There's people who are sitting with tons of masks that they can't sell today, as well as sanitizers. So I guess it does help, to establish yourself in one field and do it well before you can start even branching out. And like you say, for example, if you look at someone like Richard Branson, for example, with the Virgin brand, who's sort of managed to, build strong brands across the different sectors that he operates in. But I guess with him also there's one thing that sort of centers him, and that is being obviously, challenging the norm and being that crazy guy that does crazy things. From your end, Giulia, any advice for young small business owners, those that have the knack to start their own thing?
So definitely the consistency is important. Consistency comes when you know what you want to deliver and to whom. So for me, it's very critical to have that connection with the consumer as whole being. We talked a lot about consumer, shopper, audiences, poor them. We really cut and chop them in every time. They are human beings. And we need to understand who do we want to, what is the opportunity that we have identified, for whom, and what about these people that we want to serve? What are their needs? What are their attention? What are their aspirations? How can you make their life better in whatever field you operate? For me, that is absolutely critical, is the human centricity. And one of the things that I learned moving from Unilever, where we had huge budgets, to PepsiCo in South Africa, where we have zero, they just gave me, okay, well, you can do whatever you want, but you don't have any money. Responsible for Africa, started traveling. How many trips we did? That was the best way, immersing ourselves, going into consumer homes, asking them what they snack, going with them to shop for their snacks, etc., etc. So this is absolutely critical. Understand that tension, that human needs that you want to fulfill. The second one is be creative about how you craft that benefit that you are delivering, because once you craft that in a distinctive way, whatever it is, you then own that space. Back to the Simba point. Simba stands for the flavor that connects South African. This is very simple. It's like it's his purpose, but purpose is not something that is overcomplicated or intellectualized. Purpose is, why does Simba exist? Simba exists to connect people, to make their moments together more meaningful, more memorable, to create memories, across generation. And this is what Simba is about. And we want to own that space. And I think we do own. And we want to do more about that. Knickknacks is going to be the real Makoya that offer the Kasi youth the opportunity to nurture their dreams. This is what we want to deliver. And we are being very specific. We are not, and we had a lot of discussion within the team. Oh, do we use influencers? We said, no influencer. We want real people. We want to go and find the real Ikasi youth that are struggling to develop, they're struggling to grow in their own passions, and they are very good at it. We don't want these influencers that are there on their pedestal. We want real people, to nurture real people. And that was very critical. Another one for me, and probably I will stop I could go on for a long time, but I will stop, is trust. Build trust. Once you decide what is that you can deliver, what is that you can promise to your consumer, to your people, just do it. Never break that trust. Simba is the chips brand that roars with flavor. That means something is not put there, hasn't been there for 70 years, because we have benchmarking tests every year, sometimes more when we have innovations, more than once a year. And we prove with facts that we deliver superior experience. Is that taste, is that flavor, is that the crunch, whatever you think you enjoy in a chip, with a 60% preference over all our competitors. This we do in and out. And if that is not achieved, we reformulate immediately.
Wow.
That is a bond that we have. We don't even need to convince R&D. They already know that when that happens, it hasn't happened often, but it has happened, they just need to go immediately. And that trust is what builds an heritage brand, because your people know that you will deliver on that, you will never fail, and they will stay with you. This will build loyalty as well. So for me, these are really what you stand for. The human centricity and the trust are three very important elements.
And of course, creativity.
And of course, creativity, absolutely.
Yeah. From your side, Mr. Abrahams?
Thank you. I think one of the things is try, learn fast. Perfect it, refine it. You know, I find in my limited time as an entrepreneur previously, I probably deliberated for too long. And I think if you look at how quickly you can get to market, whether it's a service, whether it's a product, it's okay. You can refine it. But to Sabu's point, I really think be clear what you are and what you're not is probably one of the biggest things that you can do. You can always try other things later, right? But just start, perfect, fine-tune all of that. All the brands we talk about, they were not invented. They may have been invented in somebody's kitchen or in somebody's, meeting in a different era, but they were quite deliberate and intentional. But they've been crafted over time. They've been crafted over years. They've been crafted over generations, centuries, by people like yourselves. So when thinking of your own, business, your own brand, be very clear what is that thing that you do, but also be even clearer what you don't do. Same how we treat brands. Like, I love knickknacks. Used to come to my primary school back then with the knickknacks man, right? So there's something in my heart that knickknacks has pinned in me, and Lion, right? But at the same time, Licorice All Sorts used to run the Comrades Marathon. We used to see that on the road, right? So there's so many different things that you are able to do with your brand. But I think the temptation is trying to be everything to everybody. It sounds cliched, but it is a real temptation. And what it does is it exhausts you as the business owner. It exhausts you in terms of, let me just sharpen this week that dimension of the brand. Let me sharpen my service. Let me sharpen my taste, whatever it is that you've put in out there into the world. And I smile the most when I see new things coming from entrepreneurs. New products, new services, but you know the ones who've cracked it. You know the ones who's going to be the next Batu. You know the ones who's going to be the next Sean's Hair or Candy & Co., for example. You know, those are the ones that really, they were formed with consumer insights, they were formed with passion, but there was love in terms of nurturing what that brand is or what that service or product actually is. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you so much. That was great. So you had it, right? Consistency, creativity, consumer centricity. The 3 C's. You won't forget that, right? Okay, cool. So we're just going to take a few questions from the audience, if you don't mind. We know we are running a bit over time. So if you have any questions, I think we'll take 4 at most. So, okay, there's one. Bukhosi, I was hoping you're not going to ask a question, but anyway, we'll give you the platform. Then we've got number 2 is that lady. Number 3, that gentleman at the back. And we're going to take two this side. I'm tempted to give you all of... Okay, let's see. Guys, be brief. Then we're going to give everyone a chance. So there's 4 hands I've noted this side. So there's Sipati, then there's this gentleman over here, then there's Ashraf, then there's a lady... Yes. Then so Ivalanga. Starting with you, Bukhosi.
Thank you. Thank you for the wonderful conversation. I think the topic is amazing. I have a question, but I just want to say something before I ask the question. So I've worked on African Bank. I've also worked on PepsiCo years ago. I think before you came and changed the agency, it was quite interesting. I think I may have also worked on TigerBrands a little bit. So I'm out of agency world. I'm an entrepreneur. So with that said, I would like to say, Sbu, I sent a proposal. Please approve. Mika is taking her sweet time. Please ask Mika to... Giulia, I sent a proposal. I spoke to, not to you, I'm speaking to Kineilwe. Kineilwe, yeah. Yes, Juice. She's very happy with the new campaign and the launch, but I'm meeting her in October, but I think I'll send you a second proposal. Zayd, I sent Sitembile a proposal. Please approve the proposal. You know, Ped, when you speak about projects, Mahlangu and projects and whatever, you do everything.
Yeah.
In the South African economy, I get it. I get it why people dabble in a lot of things. I think it's a privilege when you want to zone in on one thing and be an expert in one thing. In the economy that we live in, we send proposals and they don't get approved. So...
budgets have been cut, Bukhosi. You haven't had. I'm kidding.
Budgets are always there, man. Budgets are there. It just depends on who you are. So I've got a platform. It's called the Think So I'm getting into my question now. I've got a platform. It's called the Think Impact Series. So there, the focus is on sustainable impact. So I hear the conversation around beautiful concepts of distinctive assets, consistency, but I do believe that there's a need for tangible actions. And the platform really is about encouraging brands to think beyond profits and products and services. In the context of South Africa, I've become appreciative of brands that do more. If you think about where we are, I always say, if we think that, we've got problems in South Africa, wait until the SASSA grants are removed from the equation. We won't be shopping in peace in Sandton. So there's a lot of work that brands are doing to help in communities. I've worked with the likes of Nestle, Mondelez, Danone. They're doing amazing work. So my question linked to the topic is, yes, we appreciate the academic insights and tips, but what is it for each person to speak on the work that they're doing in communities with youth, and what has been the impact from those activities and initiatives that you guys are doing? Thank you.
Maybe before you respond to Bukhosi, I approved your proposal to speak, and you spoke. Maybe respond to I approved your proposal to speak, and you got the platform, and you also sold your platform on my platform. But anyways, that's good. If you don't mind maybe responding in terms of the tangible stuff that you guys are doing on the ground.
Yeah, I'll try to be very quick. And I think, in fact, I worked with Bukhosi on the repositioning of African banks. So that ad with Ricky Rick, I mean, he was instrumental in writing that script. One of the most respected brand strategists that I've ever worked with. So, big ups to Bukhosi on that. Doing good is good for South Africa. You don't do good so that you can stand on a podium and beat your chest. And I always think that brands should remain humble. I think a lot of brands do so much. You know what I mean? They just do so much and take so many, chances on people and on, platforms and on ideas. So, We are really, throwing ourselves behind, entrepreneurship with our entrepreneurship summit. We are not just exposing them to markets, training them and coaching them, but also giving them funding and giving them like a practical. We underestimate the value of a big brother that's just going to guide you. If you look at even a professional sports person, you underestimate the investment that goes behind that, to just make that a success. So there's numerous activities, Bukhosi and everybody else that wants to know. It's just a very hard thing to always, to put at the forefront as a brand, to say, hey, look at us, we're doing all of this, because we understand that there's just so much more that needs to be done. But I must tell this story. About 6 years ago, a young man who manufactures socks came to Stellenbosch to meet with me. And, this young, black, tall, skinny, I won't mention his name.
I guess we all know who he is.
And I thought to myself, at that time, I was redoing the uniform for that bank. And I was in charge of redoing the uniform, right? Every experience matters. So when I was in high school, I didn't make the woodwork class, and then they threw me in fashion and fabrics. I was, teased by every other child for a long time. But, years later, all that knowledge came full circle, and I, I did the uniform for my previous employer. But anyway, he comes to see me, and I give him an opportunity, right? And I say, hey, I'm actually creating uniform. I'll make your socks part of the uniform range. We've got 10,000 consultants in all our branches. That's going to be a lot of socks. And it's part of uniform. You don't change uniform every day. And I gave him the order. Not only did I do that, then I paid him 500,000 deposit. He was supposed to deliver the order around October because we were supposed to deliver it in January. The date came.
Can socks cost like millions? Okay.
Well, it was a lot of people that each need 3 pairs of socks. So it was a decent business. It was going to be a couple of millions a year. The date came and went, no socks. And then he gave another date, came, and then in December, he comes to see me and tells me that his grandmother passed away and he had to use the money and blah, 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 So we all know, So it's a huge responsibility to be a leader in a company, because you have to constantly give people opportunity. And you have to grow resilient to disappointments, because you are going to be disappointed, because there are going to be people that, and it's unfortunate that it happens, but it does happen. You know what I mean? So when she talked about trust as an entrepreneur, it's a major one, because, not all CMOs are going to be the same. Another guy would be like, no, never again. You know what I mean? I've tried it. It didn't work. I'm not taking a chance, and that's it. So for me, you'd come into my office and say, hey, Sbu, I've got this thing. I want to do an event and whatever it is, blah, blah, blah. I trust you. You know what I mean? And I give you a chance. But when I give you a chance, obviously, absolutely. So there's a lot of things that are behind the scenes. I just want to answer, because I'm not sure if you want to get into the detail of what your brands are actually doing, but trust me, brands do quite a lot, you know what I mean, for individuals. And a lot of it goes unnoticed. And it's okay. We don't want it to be noticed.
Sure. I think in the interest of time, we'll just keep it moving swiftly, right? Sbu has already said quite a mouthful. So any other hand this side? Oh, yeah.
So I am 20 years old, but like Sbu, I knew what I wanted to do for quite a while when I was 14 as well. I, funny enough, did my job shadow at TigerBrands under Miguel. And sort of going from high school into varsity, now I'm in my second year. How do you maintain passion and zeal and that fire for marketing? Because as much as I am young, like sometimes, you know, you see what's happening in the industry and it does seem really big, and I'm a small girl in a very big world, you know, and yeah, I just wanted to know how did you, and what advice do you have for people in a similar position to maintain that fire?
Yeah, thank you and congratulations. I think, you know, I spent a lot of time in the library reading, just like, you know, with the shredder. My first job was, you know, in Woolworths in Port Elizabeth, and I was standing at working for MTN at an MTN counter selling phones. You know, standing the whole day. I felt like I was gonna die. It was horrible. You know, but then after a week, I thought to myself, no, man, I better get out of this, you know, this box, and, you know, go and interact with the customers. So I started selling phones to the customers inside the shop. You know, I started with the staff, and, you know, so you just have to be enthusiastic, and you have to look at opportunities everywhere. I remember writing my first business proposal. I wrote at 14, and yeah. And I actually got quite far with what I was pushing. You know, I don't know what I was thinking. I don't know what I was drinking or smoking. But, you know, but in 2000, I was you know, almost I was your age as well, and you know, they used to sell airtime on this card that looks like an envelope, and you used to have to open it, and then there'll be a number. But you know, I work for MTN, so the envelope was just yellow. So some guy at Woolworths head office was in charge of the marketing, in charge of these, you know, stores or whatever it is. And I wrote a long letter about how there's a lot of dead space on this, you know, thing, and we could advertise and put promotions or whatever it is. You know, then I phoned him and I said, "Did you get my letter?" He said, "Yes, I got it." He says, "Yeah, what you gonna do about it? You know, we should." He says, "Yeah, whatever, good ideas and whatever it is." You know, he just brushed me off, and, you know, he indulged me, but, you know, nothing happened of it. Anyway, I obviously left, and my career went, you know, I went to other companies. And, you know, eventually, later on in the years, I was interviewing him for a job in my department. And looking at his CV, then I thought, but wait a minute. Did you work there? Do you remember, kid, that? So it's your passion, stick to it. You know what I mean? One day, I'm going to be coming for a job interview, and you're going to interview me, and you're going to say, but wait, aren't you the guy that was speaking at? So you just have to keep at it, and you have to get knowledge from everywhere. Don't expect to go to a formal institution, sit there and get the knowledge. You're going to have to get knowledge from everywhere. Just being here. There are other people that are attachers, but you're here, and you're getting some insights and knowledge that are going to shape your career and shape your future. So, you know, that's just what it is.
Yeah, you being here. Tick. There's a question. Sorry?
Sorry, I just want to build super quick. Two words. One, stay curious. Just go out there and keep absorbing. Don't just stay still, but keep learning whatever you do. Have new challenges that can stretch you. And the second one, small wins, because when you deliver something that has an impact, you feel fulfilled, and that will regenerate your passion. But sometimes can be daunting. So just identify what are the hanging fruits that you can deliver, and that will give you a lot of energy back.
Wow, that was good. Can you maybe introduce yourself, name and where you're from, and boom, question.
Hi guys, my name is Atengosa Jahana, and I'm a strategic planner. I think this is it's a very like an interesting topic, because I think the briefs that we've probably got in the past 3 years is how do you take a legacy brand that has been through so much and make sure that it starts to relate and future-proofing for the future generations to come. So I think I've got 3 questions. for the
Please stick
no,
to
no,
one,
no, no, no.
because
Like,
of time.
look. The questions are very interlinked, so maybe I can just keep it to two. I think when it comes to legacy brands, I think how then do you? Okay, let's say for example you have smoothies, for example. And from there, you do have the memory structures, right? People can people can tell who you are, but then you don't have the financial means to actually leverage that to actually kind of go forward. Like basically, there's no budget. How do you make the decision to actually still compete, knowing that very well is that for a while you've been relying for the fact that people know you, right? You don't have to put in that much money, but then when is the time that you decide to say, okay, I think they're all catching up now, so it's time for us to basically start almost like an investing. And number two is that when it comes to targeting, Giulia, do you think we're actually targeting enough in terms of, if you know, like I think the brief, it says they've got the core and the growth audience, right? Millennial and Gen Z. But if you look at the black middle class, you can actually just segment it in three within that as well. Do you think in general, are we segmenting it? And for the banking part, I think, do you think when it comes to, last one, I promise. Do you think when it comes to almost like banking in terms of targeting the right people? So I feel like when it comes to black middle class, in a sense, there's a certain almost like how they start to target. It's like who's your target audience? You have to almost start to reach like a certain amount of like an age or something like that. But do you think now for like African Bank, do you think that there's also further opportunity to actually start looking for? There are guys now that are young, they've got a lot of money in a sense, they've got access to that. Do you think there's when it comes to targeting, when it comes to the financial sector, when it comes to consumers, do you think we can do more? That's all. Thank you very much.
Smoothie. I'm calling you Smoothie now. Look, there's, art and science, eh? So let's go there. I think there's enough data that tells you that if you don't nurture and support brands over consistent periods, you're going to be in trouble. There's a lot of that. But I know we're in tough economic times. I know we're in, the whole world is in a bit of a turmoil at the moment. But it is about ideas that really can make a difference. Not everything is about one channel of communication or one audience or whatever the case might be. So my encouragement to my teams, agency partners, anybody actually, is bring the idea, right? And I'm we don't like to talk about budget, but I'm one of those guys. Bring the idea, build a business case, and let us select which is the one that's going to have the biggest impact. And Kanta will tell you, I'm a fan of, I want the results now, but I also want to build into the future, right? And that is a holy grail. And some brands are able to do that. So the latest work that we've got out on Coup, on Albany, on All Gold, all are hitting those marks in terms of, yes, I'm able to get delivery now, because delivery now means that my business cases going forward and my team's business cases are going to be better received, right? But at the same time, I don't want to do something that's short-term and erode the future of the brand for the next years to come. Let's call it that. Do you want to take targeting or anything?
I'll do quickly targeting, and then I'll pass it over to you. I don't think we do enough on targeting. I think we are clear on what the broader target is. The one that is the communication design target. But I think we need to do much more work with our agency partners and leveraging first-party data specifically to understand in a much more granular way our audiences, what are, and again, let's call them people, not audiences, but what their passion points are, what their lifestyle is, what their struggles are, for example. So one of the things that is obviously there is another purpose thing, but we want to do more and more is to really try and mine the first-party data to try and get as personalized as possible in our communication. There is much more we can do in that field.
Yeah, I think for banking, it's not that banks look, once you start having money, then you become a customer. We are cradle to grave. If you've got an ID, you should have a bank account. And it's not about getting to a certain level and then thinking about money. In fact, I stopped buying my kids birthday gifts, and I now just give them investment, like either shares or savings, because then, by the time they're 18, then they could have, a small little, nest egg, and get them to be, financially savvy, talk money, and let them manage their money. So cradle to grave. As long as you've got an ID, there's no reason why you shouldn't have a bank account.
Talefo is not going to have parties and gifts. I'm kidding. Yeah. We've got questions this side. Starting with you, Ashraf. Please be brief.
I will. Okay, my name is Ashraf Gada from Champion South Africa. Here's the point. We talk about heritage brands. I'm very interested in what I call champion brands that are best in class, which all are, right? Here's the point. When we speak with affinity about the Italian brands like the Ferraris and the Fiats and the Juventus Football Club and so on, right? How do we get our heritage champion brands to be exported and loved by people all around the world who know squat about South Africa in the same way that we know squat about Apple and about Huawei, for example, and where they come from, but we just love them. So that's the one thing. And the other one, very quickly, time is against us. One of the disadvantages, my understanding of a heritage brand is, well, the advantage is you have this massive audience. The disadvantage is you can't innovate because the audience owns the brand. And a classic example of last week only was the example of the Springbok second strip rugby jersey, which effectively became a Checkers jersey, right? And there was an uproar because the people of South Africa felt like, that's our jersey, you can't do that. So what I'm interested in is, with the Springbok heritage, that I'm suggesting that the brand is then owned by the people. So there are inherent risks in a heritage brand. If you've got that, that's the second one. The first one was about championing around the world. Thank you.
Yeah, I think I can talk about the story of Nando's. But before you need always, you mentioned art and science, right? So you do need some theory, and then you practice and you see whether you validate the theory, right? For me, you need to have a universal tension or a universal human need in order to do that. In the Italian fashion, for example, fashion labels that I mentioned, you have this aspirational need that is across every race, every gender, every part of the world. And that drives the brand becoming an international brand. What are the universal needs, not only in Africa or in South Africa, but that we can drive beyond? And when we match that, I can tell you it will happen. Okay, Nando's. So my story was, I was telling Pat before we started, I didn't know that Nando's was a South African brand. I grew up not eating any fast food, never. In Italy, your mom cooks, blah, blah, blah. Then I moved to the UK, I really struggled. And finally, I found a place where I could eat clean, flame-grilled chicken. That was amazing. For me, it was a British, but I didn't know anything about South Africa until I met my husband. But I met Nando's before meeting my husband. And then I realized that it was a South African brand when I moved to South Africa. But at the time, Nando's was meeting, and obviously was meeting other people's needs because he had expanded in the UK, was meeting my need. And this is how I consume, and this is why, for me, everyone should know about Nando's. Everyone should have the opportunities to try Nando's. So this is absolutely critical. The other point is, it goes back to the balance that you need to strike. You really need to be careful about how you change and how you innovate. An heritage brand is extremely, extremely delicate. And I'm gonna mention another example. We had, so one of the fun things is that we collaborate across competitors, right? One of their biggest brands, Mrs. Bol Chutney, is one of our biggest flavors, which is Simba Mrs. Bol Chutney, one of our tea flavor. There is another collaboration that we had with All Gold Tomato, is our tomato flavors. So we were trying to, simplify our portfolio. We had too many flavors, etc. And we decided to reduce the number of flavors to have a bigger impact on shelf, to reduce complexity, etc., etc. We didn't want to make the decision on our own. We ran a campaign asking, these are 3 flavors, one of these has to go, okay? Which one? It was really a competition. Which one do you want to keep, okay? All Gold Tomato was the last one. We discontinued it. You have no idea the uproar that we had on social media. We said, but you have tell us, so you need to then also manage very well that part, because it will happen. It's a risk that you need to face, and you need to make sure that you are prepared. You need to make sure, one of the things, for example, that we said, which was very true, we want to make space in the portfolio for new, amazing innovations. Therefore, we sacrifice this, but watch this space. It might come back at some point. We had actually, we ran a similar thing with Lay's salt and vinegar. It was amazing. It's not part of the portfolio, but every now and then we bring it back. Sold out, completely sold out. So that could be an opportunity for you to grow your brand.
Hi, everyone. My name is King Mawandi, 6 months into marketing, Millennial Mindset Media. Mine is more of an existential question regarding branding or heritage brands. When it comes to heritage brands, the panel spoke about how for a successful heritage brand, there needs to be purpose. But seeing that heritage is unchanging, you can't change history. It is the way it is. What does that say about your brand evolving? Does that mean you can't evolve or you can't change your purpose?
I don't know of a brand that would change its purpose. I'm not saying that it's not possible, but it's very tricky to do that. Most that have tried have failed, actually, and ended up in the grave, in the cemetery. The purpose of the brand is really what it stands for at the heart. It's seldom not something a customer would know that this is, what the purpose is. It's what drives people within the business and what they develop, what they create and everything. So if you lose your soul, then, you've kind of like really lost something that really gives you that reason to exist. Because whoever it is that needs to create, where do they draw the inspiration for that creation from? So when you've lost your purpose, you've almost lost your identity in a way, or if you're to change. So when we talk about brands evolving, I think we're talking about, well, in my example, you're evolving with the time, in terms of being relevant, in terms of, because things change, colors change, flavors change, your palate. When I started drinking, Jack Daniels was, the whiskey of choice. It was like, if you don't drink Jack Daniels, you're not a cool guy. I tried to drink it a year ago, and I just couldn't understand how on earth I ever put that liquid down my throat, because my palate has changed. The product is still the same, but the palate has changed. So evolving is your communication and everything else to keep yourself relevant. so that generation to generation, they still experience you, but for what that generation's time stands for and is.
It's like me with polony, French polony. I can't stand it today. I used to eat it so much in varsity.
You've just become bougie. That's all.
All right, we'll take one last question, or two last questions. Quickly, Sipati and the gentleman. Then we're closing it off. Bulelani. Ungabalabali.
So heritage and language, they are 6 and 9. And I haven't had any emphasis on languages, especially South African languages. So I really, really would like to see, I do understand that we are talking about future brands, and how are you going to make sure that you maintain the language? I normally say, as long as we have services and products, we are going to have languages, we are going to have radio. So I translate, I'm a voiceover artist, and my company does the same. Meaning that I'm here for you. If you need anyone who will promote languages, and anyone who will promote languages, brands, in the mother tongue that is spoken in the country. We have about 10, 11, and 12 now. So we utilize them all, all the radio stations that we work with, utilizing the language. And as long as the brands are there, the heritage is there, the language will always be there. And we work with different advertising agencies, Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Any comments, like from a language perspective?
100% support what you're saying. The bank I was at before, I did, billboards in languages. But I think we're all doing everything in languages. But again, is it something that you talk about specifically? I do my communication in 10 languages, etc. But it is important about how we connect with consumers, how we connect, knowing who our consumers are, who are we trying to reach, and what is the best way to do it. So I really admire what you do for the industry, so thank you so much. And I think we all do have a role to play. This is not a one language conversation that we have in here, so hopefully you didn't take out that we only do English or so. Yeah?
Yeah. Okay, Bulelani, please be brief.
Yeah, finally. Good evening, everyone. My name is Bulelani. I just want to ask, how do you ensure, right? As a heritage brand, that the message that is being represented out there of your brand, whether it's print media, it's adverts, is a message that speaks to the actual consumers? Because I think one of the things I've seen over the years, and having had the opportunity to engage a number of agency CEOs, large agency CEOs, is how they've been able to also pick up that the guys that they work with, the strategists, the guys that are writing the copy, especially when it's to township, are far removed from the language, from the stories, and how to actually tell them. So sometimes you see activations and brand messaging and ads, and you sit there as a township guy and think, this makes no sense, this mashup. And it becomes very important because the leaders who are sitting on the podium have got their hands firmly on the pulse of what's going on. But is that message trickling down to the teams that are writing the copies, running the adverts, and the agencies that are actually delivering on this impact work? Thank you.
Yeah. I don't know how this works though. So in the example that I mentioned on knickknacks, you have no idea the first reverse that we got was exactly like, right, what part of the Kasi youth did did you not understand? And what we did afterwards was to take everyone, us, our cross-functional team, the agency, into immersions to actually talk to them. So it goes back to the human centricity point I make. I don't do anything if I don't know that there is a consumer need and that whatever we are developing as a concept resonates with them, is culturally relevant with them, and is proven. Now, we do a lot of research, and I am very aware that not everyone has got the budget to do it, but then immerse yourself in that part of the culture that you want to serve. That is free. You can just go and you can ask questions and you can be curious. But that for me is the important part. Now we don't even try. We always go, the starting point is we want to target the youth, or with Doritos we target gamers now. We have done a lot of work on gaming. We go and sit with them and learn from them and understand them. This is how we overcome. Do we get it right all the time? No, but every time we learn, and then we try to apply that learning.
Cool.
So I think as brand custodians, jointly with agencies, it's also making sure that we do have the conversations with agencies about who's working on our accounts, who's working in the teams, making it more representative as an industry and bringing the right experiences to the table. It is our responsibility to have the right briefs. But again, I'm leaning in on agency partners. Can you help us, immerse yourselves? My Albany team, they go out to deliver bread with the agencies for a brief at 3 o'clock in the morning to know what is that hustle? How do we get the fresh bread out there from the bakery to the communities that we serve? If I look at Fatties and Moni's, homage to Italy, thank you. But the communication that the team have cracked with that is based on a nowhere else but South Africa insight of Afro-Italiano, right? There are people that dress Italian, think they're Italian, eat Italian, wish they were Italian, etc. But it's like from another era. This is a true thing. And they've captured such a magical, creative point of view that, really puts the gold standard up for pasta in the country. But it's not saying pasta is Italian, with respect. But it is about, it's us, it's Afro-Italiano. And I'm so blessed, the team shared this morning, well, we are blessed that Luri's, we shortlisted for Luri's with that campaign. That was just this morning. So again, it is possible, but yes, in these seats, we need to empower our teams and the agencies to make sure we drive higher representation in the industry, right? Far more higher, but far more insightful, getting closer to the consumers collectively. It's not agencies' jobs or clients' jobs, no. We're doing this for the people, right? The person. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. We're going to take one last question, my man. Please be brief.
I'm going
Straight to the point.
All right. Hi, guys. My name is Lerato Munaring. My question is mainly around entrepreneurship. Sbu mentioned, avoiding being a jack of all trades, and Zayd also mentioned that you don't have to be everything for everyone. But as an entrepreneur who's inspired by the likes of your Bidvest locally and companies like Yamaha that own, musical instruments, but they also have motorbikes, at which point, as an entrepreneur, should you start thinking of branded house and a house of brands? Is it something that's only reserved for the guys who are well established, who can acquire other companies? Or is it something that you can think of early on in your entrepreneurship journey? And what are the dangers of that? Because I don't see anything wrong with having Kumalo & Sons and running a graphic design company and also a catering company, especially in our current economic climate. And like Sbu mentioned that he met a guy in Tembisa who owns companies across multiple sectors. But like, triggering back to my question, at which point should you start thinking branded house of brands as an entrepreneur when you're planning on, basically scaling up and growing your business?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I would say study the attributes of Bidvest. What are the attributes that they leverage that allow them to be the company that they're in? These things don't just happen by accident. You got to understand that. But a very slight answer for you would be, I think at the point where you can pay the bills, it's what's the point of having 10 companies that are 10 broke companies? You know what I mean? It makes no point. In fact, it's just confusion, because that's also a message you're sending out. So the reason why people tend to move between inception and deception and never really move to the third stage of identity, of your identity, which is transformation, is the ego. That's why people, if you've got you're trying out a new relationship, at some point, or in fact, Jim is one of the best examples of this. It's a new year, you're motivated, you want to do something new and everything. You can visualize it, you see it happening, right? Because you're unconsciously competent. You don't know nothing, but you think you know, right? And then you start doing it. And then you become consciously incompetent. Now you know that it's going to be hard work, because you saw someone doing a catering business. You think you can do it. You usually cook on Sundays. Everybody says your food is nice. What could be so difficult? Pat is doing it. Nanfuna no Pat. Yeah. I was brighter than him in school. I can also do a brand thing, right? Yep. And then you start doing it, and then you realize that actually it's going to need a lot of hard work. If it's gym, you're going to have to wake up every day. Your body is sore. You're going to eat the stuff you don't really like. You cut down on the sugar. Start messing around with your mind. Then you're going to start rationalizing with yourself. Actually, I like the way my body is, Or Utabo was not that bad. You know what I mean? Or this company was not that, so your ego is to protect you. Whenever you go into a zone that is uncomfortable, it will always try to tell you that what you had was better. So rather go back. And what you do, you go in this vicious cycle of starting new things. And whenever it gets hard, you just go and start another new thing. You don't go through the pain of that second stage of deception, which is long and which is hard. And that's where you need to have a formula to your business. What's the formula? How many customers must I approach? What services am I selling? What is it about my service that makes it superior? What would make them know that anything with my logo on it, it's going to have, what do you say? It's the gold standard. What is the gold standard of the service? And you have to develop that, because that's when they're going to say, hey, Kumalo and Sons, no, they're reliable. So whether they've got a truck that delivers furniture for you, or they've got a printing company, they're friendly, they're smiling, they're XYZ, that's the gold standard, so that's what the customer comes for. So people start new things over and over again because their ego is just telling them that thing that's hard, try something else.
Yeah.
And that's the worst thing to do.
Awesome. In my mother tongue, it's in Ndebele, we say, as that was okay. I don't know how to translate that. So we can talk, forever. So we can't end. There's so much wisdom here. There's so much experience. There's so much expertise, right? And I guess each and every one of you in Bumi note this. They need to come for our podcast so that we can go deeper, like the man of God. I'm kidding. On these topics. But thank you so much. I can never thank you enough, for making the time out to come here and share experience and expertise. And I guess our audience found this very invaluable, And when in my proposal I said I've got young professionals and I've got young students and I've got young entrepreneurs. So I've ticked all the boxes, okay? Yeah, of course, and I've got the experts. So thank you so much for everyone for honoring the invite. And yeah, over to you. And one more time, give it a clap for African Bank.
Thank you so much. It was a beautiful discussion. You spoke about consistency, you spoke about mileage, you spoke about evolution and making sure that we don't miss the history. I think Imongi said, there's no tomorrow without a yesterday. I think that's what we said. But you also spoke about creativity, building trust, and making sure we try and learn. And I missed the last ones. Try, learn, and? There was... There we go. Test and learn. There we go. So I hope you guys took a lot from our panelists. Before they get off stage, please could I ask that you guys just smile for the camera whilst you are standing? Or do they need to stand? Whilst they're shuffling, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for this evening, for making it. And also thank you very much to African Bank for making today possible. We do have 2 winners from the Take a Lot. And just before maybe I continue with the winners, please could you give them a round of a hand of a clap. Thank you. And we have 2 winners. So as mentioned, I hope you have posted. But on Instagram, we have our first winner, which is @King_Mawandi. And on Twitter, we have Unozipho Mashaba. Thank you so much for interacting with the brands. Thank you so much. I think that's it from my side.
Pat. It's Pat on Brands. Watch how you branded, man. A pat on the back is a pat from the man. Better be branded, man. A pat from the pat is a pat on the brand. If it's enormous, flawless, gorgeous, don't get caught.